what his generation or your generation is like to a large degree?
I mean, Beck is what Beck is like, you know? He does music, it's a lot of fun. It's earth-shattering in terms of the noises he puts together, that he writes real songs. They're clever songs. For the most part, they're not exceptionally moving, but they're really brilliant. It's I mean, it's, I don't know, comparing us to, you know, it's apples and oranges. It's two different things. That I don't think we should be held at all to the same standards that are, you know, when people talk about Beck, that they're concerned with. It's a completely different thing. It happens to be music, but, I mean, it's like going and seeing, you know, some art film, you know, okay, you go and you see Iron Man, and then you go and you see, you know, Spielberg, you know, E.T. It's like, and they're both even kind of sci-fi, you know? How are they related? Are they the same? Can you even compare them, even though they're both movies? You know, he's a great songwriter. And thinking about him or thinking about competing with him is kind of ridiculous. He does something that's so original. There's a lot of good music. I mean, there's bands like the Wallflowers who are more straight-ahead rock. Counting Crows, you know, he can be kind of whiny, but he's also just a drop-dead great lyricist, great songwriter. There's Victoria Williams, who's just an astounding songwriter. You know, there's kind of no end of good music. There's Cibo Mata, who are maybe more on the fun dance, you know, Beck side of there's Los Lobos, straight ahead, perfect rock. You know, or Radiohead, who are really overwrought and wonderful.
But you tend to see other musicians purely in terms of their musical merits, as opposed to what they represent, about the zeitgeist or any sort of other baggage.
All the zeitgeist, it's bullshit to me. It really, I mean, I can get as into an artist's personal story as anyone else, but I don't know, maybe in hindsight, there's something about reading too much into current music. It's whether you like it or not. I think that is the only thing that's valid, whether you think they're full of shit or whether you think they're honest. I mean, you know, you can bring out, there's like Gillian Welsh or Alison Krauss, you know, just good, straight, you know. Alison Krauss, you know, the songs she's choosing to do are not lyrically masterful, usually. They're good country, you know, bluegrass music. And she's honest and plays them beautifully and does such a great job that it works. And that, I don't know, there's the idea of pigeonholing things too far and starting to talk about, you know, what is the voice of a generation, you know, was Kurt Cobain the voice of a generation? And Kurt Cobain was an exceptionally good songwriter, and he wrote songs that were moving nonsense, you know. To some degree, they were visceral, and at the same time, you had no idea what he was talking about most of the time. Just created something really great, and then you tie another bunch of bands to it, and you say it's a movement or whatever, but, and I mean, obviously they came out of a situation, and they had a context, but to read too much further into that is, I would say, demeaning to the artist who's doing it. That it becomes less about them and more about everything around them. I mean, I guess that's a thing for writers to do, and that's okay.
To create the myth or to create the hype.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just create something interesting to write about. Because, I mean, what would an article, you know, to write about Beck and say, boy, this album's really good. It sounds so cool, and I like the songs, and wow, it just sounds so cool. I mean, how many pages could you write of that?
you've got to manufacture the mythology. And, he was wondering if there's any one songwriter that you have more respect for than any other, if there's any one sort of ultimate role model to which you aspire.
I'd say Joni Mitchell. Of anybody. She's always written what's on her mind and not cared about what people think, and she musically took chances decades before other, she would blaze these trails and never get credit for it, because by the time other people headed that way, people had forgotten that her albums were 10 years old, where she would do the same thing. I mean, with Hissing the Summer Lawns, that's all kind of production and sound stuff. But, beyond production and sound, just the lyrics she writes are always meaningful, and usually really good. There's not much that isn't excellent that comes out of her. She holds herself to a really high standard, and I think puts out excellent work.
And you think she still has it?
Yeah. Have you heard Turbulent Indigo?
No.
It's a really good album.
The song Little Buddha, you talk about sort of all things being nothing more than an illusion, which sounds rather Buddhist. Do you embrace that, any of that sort of philosophy or Eastern thought? Or?
Philosophically, I do probably the typical Western, especially typical Western-raised Jewish. For some reason, I'm told we are particularly drawn to Buddhist tenets.
Were you just working with, say, exoticism or imagery, or was it something more abstract as opposed to something that focuses on Buddhist philosophy?
Oh, no. It was about the idea of, the basic idea, right? The noble truths. Life is suffering. Suffering comes from desire. To the elimination of desire, one may eliminate suffering, or at least significantly lessen it. Order now. But don't add that, please. But, that is a basic concept. The thing is, you get really far into anything, and you get into Buddhism, and you go, well, what kind of Buddhism? It's like talking about Christianity as a blanket statement in the States. There's infinite varieties to Christianity.
Right.
And you can write them all off in one broad stroke, but, putting a Quaker and a Pentecostal in the same room, you're going to get very different results in any given situation. And, putting a Zen Buddhist and then, any other myriad of the flavor, of the various schools in the same room, you're going to get very different results. Things become religious and they're brought apart from the initial philosophy. But, as the initial philosophy, and I guess it goes back to the reoccurring theme in in a lot of the songs, is, for me, I think my problem is I don't live in the present. I live in the past and the future. I want things I don't have. When I get those things, it doesn't please me, so I decide I need something else. That for me, there's this whole circle of desire and it doesn't mean like pleasant desire. I desire my wife. I desire the company of friends. Those things I think are very reasonable, but it's these unmanageable wants that will never satisfy me that are kind of they're just a constant pain in the ass. So I really agree with the idea that not wanting, it's not even wanting ridiculous things, but just not being in a constant state of want is a very good way to live. So anyway, I guess that song comes back to that a little. And this comes, a friend of mine always had this Buddha that I would go into his room and he would pick up his Buddha and go, life is suffering, ha 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 ha. And then his life is suffering, tee hee ha ha. Which, if nothing else, is kind of like, well, yes, yes, it's pain, try to have a good time anyway.
So throughout this song are all these little references that are very significant to you, but the